She wore her grandmother's perfume to survive another shift. Rent was 3 weeks overdue, and Ristorante Bellavista paid in cash. But when the Mafia boss at table 12 caught her scent, froze mid-bite, and whispered orders to lock the doors and kill the cameras, Stella Monroe realized some family heirlooms were more dangerous than diamonds. If you're enjoying this story, hit subscribe and drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from. I'll have another captivating story for you tomorrow, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Now let us begin. The thing about desperation, Stella Monroe had learned, was that it made you stupid in very specific ways. Not reckless stupid, like robbing a bank or picking a fight with a bouncer, more like accepting a waitressing job at a restaurant that was obviously a front for something. Illegal stupid. The kind of stupid that paid $200 a night in cash, no questions asked, which was exactly the kind of stupid Stella needed right now. She balanced the tray of wine glasses like her life depended on it, which, given her current financial situation, it basically did. 3 weeks behind on rent. Her grandmother Grace's Alzheimer's medication running low because insurance was a joke and pharmaceutical companies were apparently run by cartoon villains. Her chemistry PhD gathering dust while she served overpriced pasta to men in suits that cost more than her car. The universe, Stella decided, had a truly twisted sense of irony. "Table 7 needs water," snapped Sophia, the head server, breezing past with the kind of effortless grace Stella would never achieve. Sophia had been working at Bellavista for 5 years and moved through the dining room like she owned it. "And for God's sake, smile. You look like you're serving subpoenas." Stella forced her face into something approximating pleasant and headed toward table 7, trying not to think about how the perfume she'd dabbed on her wrists earlier, her grandmother's vintage blend, seemed unusually strong tonight. She'd found the bottle while cleaning Grace's apartment last week, tucked in a drawer beneath yellowed photographs and letters Stella hadn't had the heart to read yet. "Wear it," Grace had said during one of her rare lucid moments, gripping Stella's hand with surprising strength. "It's yours now. It's always been yours." Stella hadn't understood what that meant. Grace said a lot of things that didn't make sense these days, but the perfume was beautiful. Gardenia and jasmine with something darker underneath, something that smelled expensive and mysterious. So she'd worn it. What was the harm? She was about to discover exactly what the harm was. The private booth at the back of the restaurant, the one Sophia had warned her never to approach unless specifically summoned, suddenly erupted in activity. Not loud activity, nothing that would disturb the other diners. But the man at the booth had frozen completely, his fork clattering against his plate with a sound that somehow cut through the ambient noise. He was staring directly at her with an intensity that made Stella's skin prickle. Vincent Marchetti, owner of Bellavista and, according to Sophia's whispered warnings, a man you did not want to notice you. Ever. For any reason. He'd noticed her. "Marco." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. A younger man materialized from somewhere near the kitchen, moving with liquid speed toward the booth. Stella's heart started hammering. She hadn't done anything wrong. What could she possibly have? "That girl." Vincent Marchetti pointed directly at her. "Don't let her leave." Every instinct screamed at her to drop the tray and sprint for the door, but her legs wouldn't move. She stood frozen while Vincent's nephew pulled out his phone. "The cameras." "Sir?" Marco asked quietly. "All of them. The security cameras." He was turning off the security cameras. Stella was going to die in a restaurant where she'd worked for exactly 2 hours, wearing her grandmother's perfume and carrying wine glasses she'd never get to deliver. Sophia appeared at Stella's elbow, her face carefully neutral. "Put the tray down, Stella." "I didn't do anything," Stella whispered. "I swear, I don't know what. Just put the tray down and go to the kitchen, now." But before Stella could move, Vincent Marchetti stood. He buttoned his suit jacket with the kind of precise, deliberate movements that suggested extreme control, which was somehow more terrifying than if he'd stormed across the restaurant. He walked toward her slowly, weaving between tables, and the entire dining room seemed to hold its breath. Stella finally found the ability to move. She set the tray on the nearest table with shaking hands and turned to face whatever was coming, because running would only make it worse. Probably. She hoped. Vincent stopped 3 feet away from her, close enough that she could see the gray threading through his dark hair, the lines around his eyes that spoke of either laughter or violence. She wasn't sure which. He was handsome in the way that dangerous things were often handsome, all sharp angles and contained power. Then he did something that made absolutely no sense. He leaned closer, not touching her, not threatening, just closer, and inhaled. Stella's brain short-circuited. Was he smelling her? Had she stumbled into some bizarre Mafia ritual where they checked if you were wearing a wire by sniffing you like a bloodhound? Vincent's eyes widened fractionally. Then his jaw clenched so hard Stella could see the muscle jump. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of an avalanche. "Where did you get that perfume?" Of all the questions Stella had expected, that one had never made the list. She blinked at him, her mind struggling to process the fact that this entire terrifying situation was apparently about her grandmother's vintage perfume. What? "The perfume you're wearing." Vincent's accent thickened slightly, vowels rounding in a way that suggested Italian roots buried under years of American polish. "Where did you get it?" "My grandmother," Stella said automatically, because when a Mafia boss asked you a direct question, you answered it. "It was my grandmother's. She gave it to me." Something flickered across Vincent's face. Pain, recognition, fury. She couldn't tell. "Your grandmother's name?" Grace Monroe. Well, Grace Marchetti, before she... Stella stopped, the words dying in her throat as she finally processed what she'd just said. Grace Marchetti. The man in front of her was Vincent Marchetti, and judging by the way all the color had drained from his face, that connection meant something very, very significant. "Madre di Dio," Vincent breathed. He turned to Marco, who had appeared at his shoulder like a well-trained ghost. "Clear the private dining room. Now. And someone find out everything there is to know about Grace Monroe, maiden name Marchetti, last known whereabouts 25 years ago." "Sir." "Now, Marco." Marco vanished. Sophia materialized to usher bewildered diners from one section of the restaurant, her smile never wavering even as she guided them with gentle insistence that suggested refusal wasn't an option. Other servers appeared from nowhere, moving with synchronized efficiency. Vincent turned back to Stella. "You're going to come with me. We're going to sit down, and you're going to tell me everything about your grandmother." "I can just leave," Stella said, hating how her voice shook. "I'll quit. You'll never see me again." "You're Dominic's granddaughter," Vincent interrupted, something almost gentle in his tone now, "which makes you family." Stella's world tilted sideways. Dominic. Her grandmother had mentioned that name exactly once, during a particularly bad episode 3 months ago. Dominic would have known what to do. She'd sobbed into Stella's shoulder. But they killed him, and I ran, and now there's nothing left but shadows. Stella had assumed it was the Alzheimer's talking, fragments of memories or dreams tangling together in her grandmother's deteriorating mind. She'd never imagined it might be real. "My grandfather died before I was born," Stella said numbly. "Car accident. That's what my mother always said." "Your grandfather," Vincent said, each word precise and weighted, "was murdered 25 years ago, and your grandmother disappeared 2 weeks later pregnant with your mother, taking with her the only evidence that might have told us who was behind it." The restaurant had gone silent around them. Every server, every remaining diner, every person in Bellavista was watching this exchange with rapt attention. Stella felt like she was drowning in their stares, in the impossibility of what Vincent was saying. All because of a perfume, a family recipe, a scent that was apparently as good as a blood test for identifying long-lost Marchettis. "I need to go," Stella said, but her feet still wouldn't move. "My grandmother needs her medication. I have a shift tomorrow at the lab. I can't. This isn't—" "Your grandmother has Alzheimer's?" Vincent's expression softened fractionally. "How bad?" Bad enough that she doesn't remember my name most days. Why does that matter? Because she's the only person left alive who knows what really happened 25 years ago. And if someone else figures out that she's still alive, that you exist— Vincent's jaw clenched again. Let's just say that the people who wanted her dead then would be very interested to know where to find her now. Stella's mind was racing, trying to process implications she didn't want to understand. Are you saying my grandmother is in danger? That I'm in danger? I'm saying, Vincent replied carefully, that you just walked into the most protected restaurant in the city wearing a perfume that hasn't been smelled in this town for a quarter century, and the security cameras are off, which means there's no record of this conversation. He gestured toward the private dining room, where the door now stood open and empty. So you can either trust me— I know that's asking a lot— or you can walk out that door and hope that nobody else recognizes what you're wearing. Your choice. But make it fast. Stella looked at the front door, then at Vincent Marchetti, then at the private dining room that probably contained either salvation or her doom. The perfume on her wrists suddenly smelled less like her grandmother and more like a target painted on her back. She took a deep breath and walked toward the private dining room. The private dining room was smaller than Stella expected, intimate in a way that felt deliberate. Mahogany walls, a table set for 6, and ambient lighting that somehow managed to be both elegant and vaguely threatening. Vincent gestured to a chair and waited until she sat before taking the seat across from her, close enough to talk, far enough to not be intimidating. A calculated distance. Marco appeared with 2 glasses of water, set them down without a word, and positioned himself by the door like a well-dressed sentinel. "Tell me about Grace," Vincent said simply. Stella's hands wrapped around the water glass, grateful for something to hold. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. Where she's been, how she survived, why she never reached out." "She never talked about any of this," Stella said. "My whole life, she was just Grandma Grace. Worked as a nurse, lived in a small apartment in Brooklyn, made the best lasagna I've ever tasted. She never mentioned the Marchetti name, never said anything about—" She gestured vaguely at the restaurant, at Vincent, at the whole impossible situation. "This. What about your mother?" "Died when I was 12. Cancer." The old grief still stung, even after 13 years. She never talked about her father either. Said he died before she was born, and Grace didn't like to discuss it. Vincent's expression darkened. "Grace was protecting you, both of you." "From what?" "From us, from the family, from people who might have used you as leverage or—" He stopped, seeming to reconsider his words. "It's complicated. Try me. I have a PhD in chemistry. I can handle complicated." Something that might have been respect flickered across Vincent's face. "Chemistry?" "Molecular synthesis, specifically. I was working on pharmaceutical applications before my funding got cut, and I ended up serving pasta to pay for my grandmother's medication." The bitterness in her voice surprised her. "So, yes, I can handle complicated chemical compounds. I think I can manage complicated family drama." "It's not drama," Vincent said quietly. "It's survival. 25 years ago, my brother Dominic was murdered. 3 other family members died that same month. Someone was systematically eliminating the Marchettis, and we never found out who. Grace disappeared right after, and we assumed—" He trailed off. "That she was dead too," Stella finished. "Yes, but she wasn't. She just ran, hid, raised my mother in secret, and then my mother raised me the same way." Stella's mind was racing, connecting dots she didn't want to connect. "The perfume. That's what gave us away?" "That perfume is a family secret. The formula was created by my grandmother, passed down through Marchetti women. Only family knows how to make it." "So I just announced to everyone in that dining room that I'm a Marchetti." Vincent's silence was answer enough. "We need to move your grandmother," Vincent said. "Tonight. Somewhere safe where we can protect her while we figure this out." "Absolutely not." Stella's voice was sharp. "I'm not letting you kidnap my grandmother based on some 25-year-old conspiracy theory." It's not a theory, it's fact, and I'm not kidnapping anyone. I'm offering protection. Protection that comes with what strings attached, Stella demanded. You don't do something like that out of the goodness of your heart. What do you want? Vincent leaned back, studying her with an intensity that made her want to squirm. You're right. I want something. I want to know who killed my brother. I want the evidence Grace took when she ran. And I want to make sure that whoever was behind it 25 years ago doesn't finish what they started. Grace has Alzheimer's. She can't tell you anything useful. Maybe, maybe not. But you said she gave you the perfume. Maybe she gave you other things too. Information, documents, something. Stella thought about the drawer full of photographs and letters she hadn't read yet. The boxes in Grace's apartment she'd been meaning to sort through. The random comments Grace made during her lucid moments that Stella had dismissed as confusion. They're still watching, Grace had said last week. They never stopped watching. Even if she did, Stella said carefully, why would I trust you with it? For all I know, you're the one who killed your brother. Vincent's eyes flashed dangerously. Dominic was my twin. We shared everything. Business, secrets, the family legacy. His death nearly destroyed me. So, no, I didn't kill him, but I will find who did. And I will make them pay. The venom in his voice was genuine. Stella had spent enough time in academia learning to spot liars, grant committees, plagiarists, professors taking credit for their students' work. Vincent Marchetti wasn't lying about his grief. There's something else, Vincent continued. The perfume formula. Grace would have needed rare ingredients to make it. Expensive ones. Difficult to source. Where did she get them? I don't know. She had bottles of it, already made. I never asked. Stella stopped. Wait, there was a notebook, in the drawer with the perfume. I thought it was recipes, like cooking recipes. I didn't really look at it. Vincent leaned forward. I need that notebook. Why? It's just perfume. It's not just perfume. The formula contains compounds that... He hesitated. Let's just say it's worth more than you know. If someone else gets their hands on it... What compounds? Stella's scientific curiosity overrode her fear. What's in it that's so valuable? Vincent smiled grimly. You're the chemist. Maybe you should analyze it and tell me. They reached an uneasy agreement. Stella would retrieve the notebook and bring it to Vincent tomorrow. In exchange, he'd arrange for Grace to be moved to a private care facility, top-tier medical staff, 24-hour security, and the kind of Alzheimer's treatment that Stella's insurance would laugh at covering. One condition, Stella said as Marco drove her home in a black sedan that probably cost more than her entire education. If I find out you're lying to me, if this is some elaborate scheme to hurt my grandmother, I will burn that notebook and everything else Grace left behind. And then I'll go to the police, the FBI, whoever will listen. Vincent, sitting beside her in the back seat, smiled slightly. You have more spine than I expected. Dominic would have liked you. Don't. Stella's voice was sharp. Don't try to make this about family bonding. You're a stranger who happens to share my grandmother's last name. That's it. Fair enough. They pulled up outside Stella's apartment building, a tired brownstone in a neighborhood that was gentrifying just slowly enough that she could almost afford it. Vincent looked at the cracked steps and flickering streetlight with obvious distaste. This is where you live. Not all of us own restaurants and pharmaceutical companies, Stella said dryly. Some of us have student loans. After tomorrow, you won't need to worry about that. Stella paused with her hand on the door handle. What does that mean? It means, Vincent said carefully, that you're family, and family doesn't struggle. I'll have Marco set up an account for you. Consider it back payment for 25 years of Grace raising Dominic's daughter and granddaughter without family support. I don't want your money. You need your grandmother's medication. You're 3 weeks behind on rent. You have a chemistry PhD you can't use because academic funding is a joke. Vincent's expression was unreadable. Pride is expensive, Stella. Sometimes it's smarter to accept help. Stella wanted to argue, wanted to tell him she'd figure it out on her own, the way she always had. But the truth was, she was drowning, and he was offering her a lifeline, even if it came with strings she couldn't quite see yet. "Fine," she said finally, "but I'm keeping track. This is a loan, not a gift. I'll pay you back. If it makes you feel better to think of it that way." Stella climbed out of the car and headed toward her building, feeling Vincent's eyes on her back. She turned at the door to see the sedan still idling at the curb. "What?" "Marco will be outside all night," Vincent called through the open window, just in case anyone else recognized that perfume. The sedan pulled away, leaving Stella standing on her cracked steps, wondering what the hell she'd just agreed to. Stella didn't sleep. She spent the night in Grace's apartment, surrounded by boxes and memories, searching for anything that might explain why a perfume formula was worth killing for. The notebook was exactly where she'd left it. Thin, leather-bound, filled with Grace's elegant handwriting. But it wasn't recipes. It was chemistry. Complex molecular formulas, synthesis procedures, notes about compound interactions that made Stella's academic brain light up with recognition. "Holy shit," she whispered, flipping through pages. "Grandma, what were you working on?" The perfume wasn't just perfume. The base notes contained a proprietary blend of compounds that, if Stella was reading this correctly, had neurological applications, memory enhancement, cognitive function, the kind of breakthrough that pharmaceutical companies would kill for. Literally, apparently. Her phone buzzed. "Vincent. Found anything?" Stella stared at the notebook, her mind racing. This was bigger than family secrets or old vendettas. This was potentially worth billions, and Grace had been sitting on it for 25 years, hiding it in plain sight as a perfume formula. "We need to talk," she texted back, not over the phone. 20 minutes later, Marco was at her door. The drive to Bellavista was silent, Stella clutching the notebook like it might explode. The restaurant was closed, dark except for a single light in the back office where Vincent waited. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said when she entered. "Worse. I've seen the future of Alzheimer's treatment." Stella dropped the notebook on his desk. Grace wasn't just making perfume. She was developing a pharmaceutical compound. The perfume was a cover, a way to keep working on it without anyone knowing. Vincent picked up the notebook, scanning the pages with growing comprehension. Dominic was a biochemist before he took over the family business. He and Grace were working on something together, something he said would legitimize the Marchetti name. "Let me guess," Stella said. "He died before it was finished." 2 weeks before they were supposed to present findings to investors. We thought the research died with him. Vincent looked up. Grace took it, finished it, and hid it for 25 years. Because whoever killed Dominic wanted this. Stella sank into a chair. "They're still out there, aren't they? Still looking for it?" "Probably. So, what do we do?" Vincent was quiet for a long moment, studying the notebook with an expression Stella couldn't read. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured. "We finish what Dominic and Grace started. We turn this into the pharmaceutical breakthrough it was meant to be, and we use it to build something legitimate, something that can't be taken away." "And the people who killed Dominic?" Vincent's smile was cold. "We make sure they know exactly what they lost, and then we make them pay for it." What would you do if you discovered your family's secret could change the world, but also put you in danger? Drop your thoughts below. 3 months later, Stella stood in a state-of-the-art laboratory that made her old university facilities look like a high school science fair. Vincent had been true to his word. Funding, equipment, a team of researchers who actually understood her work. Grace was in the finest care facility in the city, lucid more often than not thanks to experimental treatments derived from her own formulas. The irony wasn't lost on Stella. "Your grandmother wants to see you," Marco said, appearing in the lab doorway. He'd become something like a friend over the past months, or at least a friendly bodyguard. "She's having a good day." Stella found Grace in the sunroom, lucid and smiling in a way that made Stella's chest ache. These moments were precious now, stolen time before the fog rolled back in. "You're wearing the perfume," Grace said, taking Stella's hand. "Every day, it reminds me of you. It should remind you of what you're capable of." Grace's grip tightened. "I couldn't finish what Dominic and I started, but you can. You're brilliant, Stella. Smarter than both of us combined. The compound is working, Grandma. We're seeing results in early trials, memory improvement, cognitive function. It's everything you hoped for." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "Dominic would be so proud." "There's something I need to ask you," Stella said carefully. "About the night he died, do you remember anything that might help us find who was responsible?" Grace was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the manicured gardens. When she spoke, her voice was distant. "There was a meeting. Dominic's partner, the one who was funding the research. He wanted to buy Dominic out, take full credit for the work. Dominic refused." "Who was the partner, Grandma?" Thomas Castellano. He said if Dominic wouldn't sell, he'd take it anyway." Grace's hands trembled. 3 days later, Dominic was dead, and Thomas disappeared. I knew he'd come for me next for the research, so I ran. Stella's blood ran cold. Castellano. Vincent mentioned that name once. Said he was an old family associate who vanished years ago. "He didn't vanish," Grace said softly. "He changed his name, became someone else, someone legitimate, someone powerful." She pulled a folded paper from her pocket, a photograph yellowed with age. "I kept this, just in case." Stella stared at the image, a younger Thomas Castellano standing beside Dominic, both men smiling, and in the corner, partially visible, was a logo. A pharmaceutical company logo that Stella recognized immediately, because it was the same company that had been trying to buy Vincent's new pharmaceutical division for the past month. "Oh my God," Stella whispered. "He's been looking for this the whole time." Grace squeezed her hand. "Then don't let him have it. Finish what we started. Make something good from all this pain." Vincent didn't explode when Stella showed him the photograph. He went very still, the kind of stillness that preceded violence, and Stella understood why people were terrified of him. "Castellano is Richard Sterling now," Vincent said quietly. "CEO of Sterling Pharmaceuticals, the man who's been circling our research like a vulture. He killed your brother for this formula, and now he wants to buy it legitimately." Stella's laugh was bitter. "The audacity is almost impressive." "Almost." Vincent pulled out his phone, texting rapidly. "Marco's pulling everything we have on Sterling, financial records, business dealings, anything that connects back to Castellano. And then what? We can't prove he killed Dominic. It's been 25 years. "We don't need to prove murder," Vincent said, and his smile was dangerous. "We just need to destroy him, the Marchetti way." Over the next 2 weeks, Stella watched Vincent orchestrate something beautiful and ruthless. Her research breakthrough, the compound that could revolutionize Alzheimer's treatment, was announced publicly. Not through Sterling Pharmaceuticals, through Marchetti Biosciences, a new company with Stella as Chief Scientific Officer and Vincent as CEO. The patent applications were airtight, the research was bulletproof, and the press coverage was massive, especially the human interest angle about a granddaughter finishing her grandmother's life work, about a family tragedy transformed into medical triumph. Richard Sterling's stock price plummeted. Investors jumped ship. The pharmaceutical community turned on him, questioning why he hadn't developed this breakthrough himself if he'd been in the field for decades. Then Marco leaked the photograph. Anonymous tips to investigative journalists, carefully worded questions about Thomas Castellano's convenient disappearance, about the timing of Dominic Marchetti's murder. Sterling Pharmaceuticals collapsed within a month. Richard Sterling, Thomas Castellano, was arrested on multiple fraud charges. Not murder, but enough to ensure he'd spend the rest of his life in prison. "It's not perfect justice," Vincent said, watching the news coverage with Stella in his office. "But it's something." "It's everything," Stella corrected. She held up a small vial, the latest version of the compound, the one that was showing remarkable results in clinical trials. "This is what Dominic died for." what Grace sacrificed 25 years of her life to protect, and now it's going to help millions of people. Vincent's expression softened. You did that. You took their work and made it real. We did that. Family, remember? Stella smiled. Even family that started as strangers. 6 months later, Stella stood at a podium accepting a pharmaceutical innovation award. Grace was in the audience, lucid and proud, wearing the perfume that had started everything. Vincent sat beside her, no longer just a mafia boss legitimizing his empire, but a businessman building something that mattered. The Marchetti name meant something different now. Not crime or violence or old vendettas, but innovation and healing and second chances. Stella touched her wrist where the perfume still lingered. Some family heirlooms were dangerous. But some were worth every risk, and some, she'd learned, were worth everything. Thanks for sticking with me to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you're going to love what's coming next. It's even crazier and more intriguing than you can imagine. Click the video on your screen right now to dive into the next story.